Hello, my name is Haley Adams, and I'm a PhD candidate in computer science at Vanderbilt University. Today, I am happy to present my work titled Shedding Light on Cast Shadows, an investigation of perceived ground contact in AR and VR, which was conducted under the tutelage of Bobby Bodenheimer, Sarah Creem-Regehr, and Jeanine Stefanucci, and with the support of Grant Pointon and Bill Thompson. A common complaint from users of augmented reality is that virtual objects appear to float within real-world scenes. One way we can try to mitigate this floaty appearance of virtual objects is to render better cast shadows. Research on human perception has shown that by forming points of contact between an object and nearby surfaces, cast shadows provide a particularly strong cue for depth judgments to objects in space. However, rendering shadows in augmented reality can be challenging. For example, optical see-through displays like the Microsoft HoloLens cannot render black color values because they rely on additive light to create virtual images. How then can we best provide surface contact information in AR, given that unique limitations and rendering approaches of different HMDs? Further, how realistic do they need to be? To investigate this issue, over 2 experiments, we assess how the way cast shadows are shaded influences surface contact perceptions in 3 types of head-mounted displays: virtual reality, video see-through, and optical see-through. Specifically, we look at the HTC Vive Pro, the Vive Pro with an attached Z-Mini stereoscopic camera, and the Microsoft HoloLens 1. In our first experiment, we presented people with 4 shadow shading conditions. 1, a traditional dark shadow. 2, a gradient shadow. 3, a white shadow. And 4, no shadow at all. Our gradient shadow condition was developed to create realistic shadows in optical see-through displays, and it's pretty similar to the shadow rendering technique proposed by Manabe, Ikeda, and colleagues. This approach uses simultaneous contrast to create the illusion of a shadow by rendering light near the outer edge of the shadow's shape. To understand the influence of these different shadow shading approaches on people's surface contact perception, we showed people virtual objects that were presented either on the ground or just slightly above it. We then asked them to rate their certainty in perceived ground contact for each stimulus using a 5-point response format, with verbal anchors where values map from 1, definitely touching, to 5, definitely above. We used a mixed vectorial design in which HMD type was a between subjects variable and shadow type was a within subjects variable. We also presented targets at multiple distances to better generalize our results. 36 people volunteered to participate in this study. For our analysis, we employed Friedman tests with Wilcoxon signed rank tests with Bonferroni correction for post hoc. These analyses were conducted independently for each display. We expected the presence versus the absence of a shadow to have a significant effect on surface contact in all 3 displays, and our experiment confirmed this hypothesis. A curious finding from our first study was that the white shadow, our least realistic shading approach, resulted in higher confidence of surface contact when objects were placed above the ground for both the optical see-through and the video see-through displays. This result was particularly unexpected given that researchers have previously argued that realistic shading for virtual objects may be necessary for accurate space perception in AR. Because the target object in our first study used a dark wooden texture, we suspected that the high contrast of the white shadow's color against the dark object allowed participants to more confidently rate surface contact. As such, in our second experiment, we explored the effect of color contrast between an object and its cast shadow. For this evaluation, we used a 2 alternative force choice design with method of constant stimuli, which is a classic psychophysical paradigm. This allowed us to use multiple heights in our evaluation and to restructure our experiment as a within subjects evaluation for further control. We used a within subjects vectorial design in which 2 levels of shading for target object and shadow were presented, and targets were shown at 6 different vertical displacements. With repeated measures, each participant completed 1,320 trials over 3 hours, which resulted in a grand total of 7,920 data points collected overall. For our analyses, we fit a generalized linear mixed model by specifying binomial errors and a logit link function. For all three devices, the dark object with light shadow condition resulted in a significantly higher likelihood of correct judgment, a result that echoes the findings of our first experiment. In the video see-through and virtual reality displays, this shading condition was the only one that was significantly different. However, people's judgments in the optical see-through device proved highly sensitive to all shading conditions. Overall, our results indicate that surface contact judgments in the HoloLens were more accurate when a light shadow was present, which is an outcome that has implications for the design of applications that rely on additive light for rendering. Yet, there are a number of limitations to the current work. One clear limitation is that we used a simple rectilinear shape as our target, which may affect the generalizability of our work. Fortunately, we've addressed this limitation in our upcoming publication, so please look forward to reading this research in the near future. A second limitation is that just as differences in color between an object and its cast shadow can influence shadow perception, as we see here, so can background information. As such, it will be important to consider different backgrounds for testing surface contact in future work. In conclusion, within this research we find that realistic shading for shadows may not be essential for creating surface contact in XR displays. At first glance, this may seem counterintuitive. However, outside of the current body of research, we can already see challenges to the need for realistic shading in related forms of media. For example, photographers use colored light and shadows for stylized effects, and video games often rely on colorful visual markers to indicate where items are located in space. The findings of our research, then, are especially promising for additive light displays, since they provide an opportunity to enhance space perception without computationally expensive, realistic rendering. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I look forward to your questions at the end of this session.